All right, so I wanted to make this video that is really centered around one question or one statement or theme, maybe, which is what are all the things that you can do in DeFi with your crypto assets? So it's very likely that you're probably doing something like what's on the screen right now every day, every other day, maybe once a week. And you probably, come to your portfolio tracker and you say, hey, I've got these assets. Maybe they're going up a lot, maybe they're going down a lot, but you're constantly monitoring them. And you're probably wondering to yourself, what can I do in DeFi? Maybe you've heard a lot about DeFi, maybe you heard a lot about it on crypto Twitter, maybe you're aware of different protocols and stuff. But most of the time, you're probably stuck in this situation of like, hey, I got stuff in my wallet, and what can I do with these assets in my wallet? And there's even a guy I saw on Twitter recently who had this exact same question. I think it was something like, I've got some staked ETH, I've got some Solana. I think he was staking the Solana as well. And he's like, what now? What do I do now? And the next step of that, the next logical step is what can I do in DeFi now? So you're probably going to end up, on DeFi Yama. And DeFi Yama is great. It's a lot of, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of data. But where do you start? Lido, for example, is very different than Maker. Maker is somewhat different than Aave. Aave is very different than Uniswap. Where do you get started? How do you get started? And this is where a lot of people, I think, get stuck, is deciding what protocol to use. Why should they use a specific protocol? When should I use one protocol over a different protocol? And this is really the question, or the set of questions, that I'm hoping to answer here today, or to help answer or provide a little bit of guidance with this video. So with something like DeFi Yama, you have a bunch of different protocols or bunch of different services that really overlap each other, and it's hard to get started, basically. And this is what I wanted to show you today, which is Summer.fi, which I think really is a great place for starting off from that very simple question of, hey, I have these crypto assets, I have ETH, I have wrap BTC, or I have staked ETH. What do I do now? What do I do next? I'm aware of DeFi, I know about DeFi, but how do I get started? Where's the best place to get started? And this is maybe not the best place for you to start. It assumes a lot of previous knowledge that you have to have. You're still going to have to go and figure out, what is Lido? How does it work? You're going to have to go still figure out, what is Maker? How does it work? What can they offer? How can I use it to my best benefit, or my highest potential, let's say? And Summer, I think, really breaks it down in a nice way that allows you to start where is best for you, basically. It allows you to start from a place that says, hey, you have these crypto assets, this is what you can do with them. And that's what I really like to touch on today, which is these three criteria, or these three categories, I would say, which a lot of these different protocols, there are probably 50, 100, maybe even 150 different protocols today. And it's hard to really parse through the different ones to say, well, what can I do with them? How can I use them? And there are really only three things that I think that many of these protocols allow you to do today. And they boil down to earning. You can earn some type of compounding yield over time, whether that's denominated in a stable asset, whether that's denominated in a native asset like ETH or something else that you're using to deposit, or whether it's multiplying, so like increasing the amount of exposure you have to an asset, and really being able to amplify your profits, or at the same time amplify your losses if you're not that lucky, let's say. And of course, borrowing. So being able to get liquidity for these crypto assets that you already own. And we're going to dive relatively deep into that one as well. Another thing that I really think is great with Summer, and allowing you to really get started in DeFi and to understand what's best for you, is if you do have a little bit of that knowledge and you do know about, let's say, Aave or Maker or Spark or another protocol like that, it does a really great job of curating and saying, hey, these are the protocols that you can trust. These are the protocols that have a lot of credibility behind them, the protocols that have been around for a long time or are for the best technical teams. And that's why they're here. So Summer really acts as a sort of curating mechanism or a little bit of a trust mechanism to say, hey, these protocols are the ones that you should be thinking about. A lot of the other ones, maybe they're in their nascent stages, and while they might be great, you probably want to wait a little bit before getting started with them. And of course, also you can start from like the tokens that you have, if that's sort of your mental model that you have. But we ladder right back into the same place of saying, hey, you want to borrow, you want to multiply, you want to earn. These three sort of categories of things that you can really do in DeFi today. These are the main categories of things that you can do in DeFi today. So wanted to go over each of them and to give sort of a very salient, let's say, or real life example of a person that I've spoken to in the past, or a person that I know in each case that has used each of these products and or each of these categories rather, and wanted to just provide an example of how you could basically use them to your advantage should you choose to do that on Summer. So we'll start with Earn, and Earn is really about being able to sort of compound your crypto, compound your assets over time in a more predictable way. So you have these assets, let's say you have ETH, let's say you have DAI, and another really great thing with Summer is that you can sort of choose the asset that you want. So today it's ETH and all the different derivatives or DAI, but in the future, you'll have USDC, all these tons of different assets that you can start with in order to say, hey, I want to earn on this asset, which makes it really great, a really easy way to filter down, as well as you'll see a bunch of different other ways that you'll be able to filter down to understand, hey, this is what I want to do, or these are the protocols, or these are the networks that I feel most comfortable with or that I've heard about before, and you can get started with them. So, as I said, I want to use an example, and I'll keep the name sort of pseudonymous, let's say. But there was a group of people actually that had quite a bit of DAI, and they were looking to do something with their DAI, and they wanted to earn on it pretty passively. They didn't want to take much risk, but they didn't want to keep it sitting in their wallet. They were looking at it, once every couple of weeks, and they're saying, hey, this is sort of great, it's in my wallet, I have this stable asset in my wallet, but it's sort of losing money in a way because it's not earning, it's not working for them. So they actually came to Summer and they said, okay, I want to earn on their DAI, and it's really easy to just, as I said, pare down to the asset that you want to use, and then unlike some other services or other platforms, you don't really have to rummage through a bunch of different stuff. We surface, or Summer really is able to surface the things that are most relevant right away. And it even allows you to pare down and think about things that you would really care about most. So, for example, if you're here and you want to do passive management, you don't want to, actively be managing your position, there's really only one option for you, and that's the DAI savings rate. And it's just clear, it's one thing, you don't really have to think too much, and you can just click it and get started. And that's exactly what this group of people did with their quite relatively large sum of DAI. And for them, really easy, just type in exactly how much DAI you wanted to deposit, and platforms like Summer make it really easy to just get that information that you would have to either calculate yourself. So, for example, being able to calculate in the DAI savings rate, it's relatively straightforward, just being able to calculate well, if I'm getting 5%, how much will I make in a year? Or how much will I make in 6 months, let's say? But that information is surfaced right away on the Summer UI, as well as, questions that you'd have to really dig deep in order to find the answers to. It's right in front of your face on the platform like Summer. How does it work? Do you have to manage this position? A big question for a lot of people is this notion of, where does the yield come from? Can I trust this yield? Is it sustainable? Is it going to last over a long time? And these questions on a platform like Summer are always answered for you. So there's no need to go to a place like DeFi or some other service like that and always be guessing, like, how long is this going to stick around? These type of questions are always answered for you. So that's Earn. And there are a bunch of different Earn strategies, and that hopefully in later videos I'll get into. But next one I want to actually talk about is the sort of second most popular or most relevant, I would say, which is actually Borrow. So again, with this notion of different stories and starting from like giving real examples, is a person that I was talking to I think about a month or maybe a month and a half ago now. And his story is that he had quite a bit of, I think it was Rocket Pool ETH, so RETH. And he found himself in a situation where he needed some extra money in his bank account. So not on-chain, actually off-chain, in the sort of traditional financial system. And he just needed some liquidity. And he found himself in a situation where it came down to, hey, am I going to sell this ETH, or am I going to find some other way to get some, liquidity, to get some dollars in order to do what I need to do for the next little while, and then pay back the loan later. And that's exactly what Borrow is for. And there are many different use cases that people can do, with their different crypto assets to say, hey, I want to borrow some stablecoin against my ETH or my staked ETH, and I want to, let's say, put it into a LP position, or maybe you want to buy some other asset, or maybe you want to buy a few different assets with the borrowed liquidity, and you have a view on the market that those different assets will outperform the underlying collateral asset. But in this case, it was really straightforward. Just wanted to get a loan, needed to do some things in the real world, let's say, or the traditional financial system. And this person borrowed against their ETH, or their Rocket Pool ETH, and that's what they did. And they did it on Summer. And again, it's really easy. You can just select whichever asset you have. So if you have Wrap BTC, you can do that. You can borrow against stable coins as well. And yeah, so it makes it really easy to pare down to see what you want and what is best for you. And once again, on Summer, the great thing is the things that are being surfaced are only things that have been sort of vetted and things that have been gone through a sort of diligence process, for lack of a better word. And that's why they are on Summer. So you can sort of have that degree of curation, that degree of trust about the different types of positions, the different types of strategies in some cases that you're seeing being surfaced here. So for example, let's say you only care about Spark, and right away you're whittled down to the things that you can do within Spark. If you want to choose Wrap Staked ETH, or in this case, like this other person, Rocket Pool ETH, and you can right away see all the stuff that you need to in a very clean and simple experience. And key information like being able to understand, all right, what is my liquidation price going to be if I have 1,000 ETH and I want to borrow, let's say, 50,000 die. I'll have an extremely low liquidation price, and I probably won't have to worry about anything too much. But it's really straightforward, and you can get access to these dollars. You can get access to these stable coin liquidity right away, which is really great. And in later videos, we'll get into the details of how to open these and things like that. But yeah, so that is basically more or less all of the things for borrow. There's one overarching thing that I want to mention for both borrow positions and multiply positions that you won't find on, for example, something like DeFi Llama, and how to think about which protocol you should use, or what your liquidation price should be, all these different things. There's some really interesting things that are unique to Summer that I'll show you in a second. So the last category is this notion of multiplying. So I leave this one for last because in a lot of ways it can be sort of the most risk-seeking strategy, which is to say the situation here is that it's the same as a lot of the others. So you have crypto assets in your wallet, ETH, Rocket Pool ETH, Staked ETH, Wrap ETC, something like that. And instead of like Earn, where you probably want to compound your crypto in a really predictable or a somewhat linear way, similarly as well, like to borrow, where you want to borrow against your crypto assets. This is similar to borrow in that you're being able to borrow against your collateral, but you'll buy more collateral of the same type and lock it back into the same position. And what that does is it really amplifies your exposure to the underlying asset. So that means if the price goes up, you'll gain quite a bit more, and if the price goes down, you'll also be quite a bit more exposed to that price. And that's the core starting point. And I think this last category of product in DeFi is really around that sort of starting point, where you say, I have this ETH and I really believe in the price long term or even in the short term, and I want to amplify my exposure to this price. And the last story I'll tell is one I'll actually maybe never forget, which is of this specific person who I was speaking to in, I think it was 2018 or maybe 2019. And they, had some ETH, and they couldn't believe how low the price of ETH had gotten, which, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But for them, they were saying they really couldn't believe how much the market had sold off to this point, and they thought it was really irrational. So what they did is that they opened a multiply position. At that time, it was called something a little bit different, but nevertheless, the mechanism was exactly the same. And they used their ETH to borrow, in their case it was DAI, to buy more ETH. And they just kept it over the long term, and kept doing it over time in a relatively conservative way, which is something we'll get into in a little bit of more detail in a second. And what that did was that it amplified their exposure to the increase of price, in their case, to ETH over time. And this is something that is also a little bit unique to DeFi, which is that the borrow rate or the interest rate that they're getting is quite a bit different to something a lot more short-term, or a little different ways in which people put on multiply positions, for example, like on GMX or something like that, where it's a lot more aggressive and short-term in nature. Products like, the multiply product in DeFi that use borrow lend or collateral, collateral-backed stablecoins like DAI that have a little bit more predictable interest rates over time allow for the long-term nature of this multiply product or multiply, as a product in DeFi that allows people to take on this amplified exposure to the underlying asset over the long term. So if you have a long-term view across an asset like wrap-BTC or ETH or staked ETH, you can really take the long-term view and amplify your exposure to that asset over time, and maximize your profits if the price of the underlying asset actually does go up a lot over time. One last thing to note here is the borrow rate. So on Summer you can not only select the specific protocols that you're interested in, so in this case maybe Maker and Spark, but you can select by the lowest interest rates, for example, and you can really easily understand, hey, I only wanna borrow DAI for less than, say, 6%, and your options will be very clear to you right away. So let's use an example here. Let's use maybe Spark. And one other thing to note is that some of these borrow rates, you really should be cognizant of how the borrow rate is derived, because in some cases, for example with Spark, you'll be earning a APY for depositing a collateral asset, and you'll also be having an interest rate or a borrow rate for the borrowed asset. But if you deposit a lot more collateral than you borrow, then the effective interest rate will be a lot lower in some cases than let's say 5%. In some cases it'll even be negative. So that's something to keep in mind, and maybe also something a little bit of a better job that Summer can do here to surface that right away. But in any case, let's use this ETH DAI position as an example, just to show you, which is, let's say you wanted to deposit 500 ETH, and a really great thing on Summer is just right away you get this easy slider that gives you the real key information that you need to know. What is your liquidation price that you're comfortable with? So me, let's say I'm comfortable with 1,500 as the liquidation price, and it just sort of updates right away, and I can say, okay, for a liquidation price of around 1,500, I can buy here, looks like around, oh, that's a little too high. For a liquidation price around 1,500, a little too low, I can buy about 650 ETH, and that would amplify my exposure to around 1155, so 1155 ETH. So I will get to benefit around the price increase of whatever the ETH price increases. I get to benefit from having that total exposure to the ETH price, which is great. But at the same time, I also have to be exposed to the downside of the same amount of ETH. So which is something you have to consider, which is a perfect segue into the last thing I want to touch on here for the sort of multiply category of things that you can do in DeFi with your crypto assets, which is really unique to Summer, which is this notion of automation. So a big question is, hey, do I have to be worried about getting liquidated? In a lot of cases, or in a lot of places, for example, if you go to the Spark app itself, you would have to be worried about being liquidated, because there's no mechanism to automatically save your position or automatically protect your position, but more importantly, protect your underlying collateral, the collateral that you deposited. which is on Summer, you can set up a stop loss, which is really nice. And you can also set up other types of automation, which I'll get into in future videos. But one that is really great to see, or interesting to see, I'll show it on this borrow position, is that you can add what we call protection here. And this is a stop loss, so you can set up a stop loss, and you can pick the price at which, or both the price and the LTV at which you're saying, I don't want to be exposed to, so much ETH or whatever the underlying collateral is, and the position will automatically close, and you'll no longer have to worry about liquidation, which is great. And we'll get into how to set that all up in a future video, but that is just one other thing that I wanted to highlight here that you won't find, for example, when looking at different DeFi protocols on something like DeFi Yoma, is you won't find these really, really important tools that allow you to take advantage of these DeFi protocols in a more sophisticated, but really just more smart and safe way. So yeah, basically that's it. That's all I wanted to touch on today. And yeah, what can this main question that I just really wanted to touch on is, what can you do in crypto, what can you do in DeFi rather with your crypto assets? Have ETH, have wrapBTC, have DAI, have USDC or something else. What can you do? And you can earn in DeFi, you can multiply in DeFi, and you can borrow in DeFi. And when you come to Summer, you no longer rather have to sift through all of these different protocols and which ones can I trust, which ones can't I trust, how do I use them, all these different other questions. At a place like Summer, it makes it really easy just to pick the simple one or two different options that are right for you and that you can trust, and just really easily get started. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll leave my information in this video and stuff, and feel free to reach out to me or anything. I'm happy to do a one-on-one call or something like that to help you onboard into something like Summer, whichever one of these piques your fancy the most. So if you want to earn, if you want to multiply, or if you want to borrow.